I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're learning our echoes and gathering might energy as I rank the bosses of The Legend of Zelda, Echoes of Wisdom. Now, what a fantastic experience this game was. Getting a whole host of new top-down and side-scrolling bosses to contend with was so exciting. Grezzo has outdone themselves, and while a lot of the fights seem easy in concept, you have to remember that Zelda is a much squishier protagonist than Link, and those late-game fights get tough. Now, I'm going to rank dungeon bosses, dungeon mini-bosses, and special tough enemy encounters you get from General Wright. I will not be ranking encounters with level 3 monsters like the Lizalfos in the Farron Wetlands or the Sword Moblin in Eternal Forest, nor will I be ranking the Lionel encounter, as ultimately they are still just enemies despite the brilliant setups. So with all that said, every boss in Echoes of Wisdom, ranked. Let me know your favourite down below. At number 21, we have the Imposter Link bow fight, found at the midpoint of the Gerudo Sanctum. I think these mini-bouts to collect Link's old gear are a novel concept, and it makes perfect sense that with imposters on the run in the story, we'd have to take on our own hero of Hyrule. That being said, I didn't enjoy how oppressive the bow variant of Link was. He could snipe any of your echoes without much effort, and it was still so early in the game that I wasn't sure what an optimal strategy was. I wanted to use my different enemy echoes to turn the tides, but ultimately found myself switching to sword fighter mode to clear him up. And then he splits into 3 clones and I want to scream. I could barely handle one of them, let alone 3. By this point, I knew my echoes weren't cutting it, so instead I cut him down with my sword, ending the fight. The other 2 Link encounters felt a bit more interesting, and I'll be covering them shortly. I just think Bow Link wasn't my cup of tea. At number 20, we have Ganon Prologue, the opening boss fight of the game, and the only one where you play as Link. And it's your classic Legend of Zelda Ganon fight, where you take on a familiar moveset of slow thrusts, energy tennis, and whacking the pig until he falls. I think it's really cool to start the game with Link's final boss fight, implying that he's at the end of his journey. We hear about Hyrule, that he helped so many people in his adventure up to this point, and getting to control a fully powered Link who is able to ravage the monsters of Hyrule with just a sword, a bow, and some bombs is iconic. This Ganon fight exists to set up the threat of the main fight later in the game, while being easy enough that you feel that overpowered nature of Link, and that's all this fight needed to be. At number 19, we have the Land Molars found in the Gerudo Desert, though the only footage you'll be seeing is of my first encounter early in the game, as the second and third Land Molars I killed right at the end of my playthrough within seconds of their fights starting. You have to wait for the Land Molar to bury itself into the ground, where using Bind on its tail allows you to pull them back out. Then you can attack the body while they're vulnerable, either with Sword Fighter Zelda or your strongest attack echoes. The main danger come from the rocks it launches when you're attempting to bind the boss, as well as the quicksand that forms around the arena, though this can be mitigated with the Gerudo Sandals, which neuters the difficulty of the encounter significantly and makes it feel overly easy. I love the reference to A Link to the Past's Land Molars, but a part of me wishes they were an optional fight you can find inside the old Desert Palace ruins, as opposed to creating sandstorms on the dunes. I just really wanted to revisit more nostalgic locations, and it felt like a missed opportunity. At number 18, we have the Imposter Link bomb fight, found at the midpoint of Eldin Temple. Despite having the same solution as the bow fight, which is to go sword fighter and harass Link as best I could, the arena layout and Link's weapon make for a more interesting encounter. The entire room is filled with breakable tiles that can be bombed, so you're having to dodge Link's nukes while trying to parkour your way up to him, making sure you don't get caught in any holes or corners. He teleports upon you damaging him, so you're having to adapt on the fly to keep up, and Link can even break out the bomb chews if he's feeling really spicy. It's not a hard encounter, he still dies to the sword, and I do think they had a missed opportunity by not cloning him into 3 Links, each throwing their own bombs at Zelda. That would have been chaos, it would have been fantastic. And I would have loved if some of the breakable blocks had bottomless pits or lava beneath them. Give us a bit of spleef action. Still, the Bomberman-style mini-boss fight has a charm I can't help but enjoy. At number 17, we have the Imposter Link sword fight, found at the midpoint of Southern Ruins. This is our first encounter with the evil Link, and the most interesting because we don't yet have Sword Fighter Zelda. In fact, this is the mini-boss that rewards us with that power-up upon completion. So we have to sneak around the arena, staying out of Link's sight, while ambushing him however we can with various echoes. I started trying to spam him with ropes, thinking one of the snakes would definitely get a stray hit in, but eventually switched to my powerhouse P-Hat instead since I felt it could do more damage. Sure, Link shields against it a ton, but it can survive more than one swing of the hero's sword, and that made all the difference, as once Link attacks, he's left vulnerable for a short moment which the P-Hat could take full advantage of. Having to really play around with my current echoes, and with the game being able to control exactly which echoes I'd have access to up to this point, is what makes this entire fight feel fresh and exciting, where the other two fall a tad short. At number 16, we have the Seismic Talus, the boss of Southern Ruins. I don't think it'll come as a shock that the first major dungeon boss is ultimately my least favourite. Design-wise, I think the Talus looks extremely cool and is a nice change of pace for the usual floating hands, floating head style of boss design. He has 2 major attacks, his forward hand slam, which leaves him vulnerable for a short window after it hits. This is the attack you want to use to bind his weak spot and yank it off to break him apart. Once you know that's how to fight the Seismic Talus though, the fight becomes a bit of a joke, as you just have to avoid one attack, target the weak spot with bind, rinse and repeat. He has a sweeping circular attack as well, which is a hitbox of his entire arm span, which can catch players off guard the first time, melts echoes in one hit as well. So you pull off the weak spot, go Sword Fighter to do the quickest damage, and then the weak spot changes from his torso, to his arm, to his head as the fight progresses. And when he enrages, his attacks get a little bit stronger and have more range. But once you know that trick, it's over like that. A lot of the other bosses have tricks to them as well, but you often have to use echoes in conjunction with the bind ability to overcome them. Here, you don't need any echoes to win the fight, and that's why it lands as low as it does. At number 15, we have Imposter Jabu Jabu, a mini-boss blocking our entrance to the Jabal Ruins. Lord Jabu Jabu has been imprisoned by the rifts, and his replacement is wreaking havoc around Jabal waters. In this fight, we're locked in a small pond where we have limited space to move around. There are some wooden beds, boxes, and logs to stand on, maybe a boat. But Jabu Jabu will zoom around the arena, breaking those platforms as he passes by, very Jaws-like. Then he does the classic big inhale attack where you need to throw a bomb fish into his mouth, which stuns him long enough for you to deal damage. Do this 3 times and you will come away victorious. The challenge comes from needing to keep creating places to stand on so Jabu Jabu and his fishes won't eat you alive. But eventually I just decided to focus on swimming instead of platforming, as I found it easier to avoid Jabu Jabu in the water. This fight doesn't do anything groundbreaking, but I like the idea of a fight blocking the path into the dungeon, as we hadn't seen that yet, and I think we've all wanted a piece of Jabu Jabu after dealing with the pain of his belly in multiple past games. Revenge! At number 14, we have Imposter Zelda, the penultimate boss fight of the game. Now, I really like this concept. We fought an Imposter Link who used a traditional moveset, but taking on a Zelda who uses the Echo system against us to summon hordes of monster echoes, that seems like a fun time. I like how the various waves of enemies she summons are often themed. Sometimes you'll get ice enemies and Wolfos, sometimes you'll get Farron Wetlands electric enemies. Admittedly though, I do feel this is a hard fight to balance, as by this point in the game, you've likely discovered some of the extremely solid combat echoes to help you in the fight. I had the Lionel Echo on speed dial, which decimated all the regular minions, allowing me to focus on shooting the floating Zelda with my bow in sword fighter form. Wizrobes are also a solid bet because they can target Zelda as well, which will eventually stun the boss, allowing us to damage her. What I was slightly saddened by though is the use of only enemy echoes. There were a lot of object echoes that could have posed a threat in certain combinations, and I was disappointed that we didn't get to see Imposter Zelda using a more player-focused moveset, instead making this a horde battle of surviving the enemies until she goes down. There's some missed potential, but it's still super fun regardless. At number 13, we have Smog Side Scroll, the rematch against this creature in the Farron Wetlands. Smog is a boss from Oracle of Ages, whose return in Echoes of Wisdom actually made me lose my mind. I mean, it's the perfect encounter to pair with the ecosystem due to his puzzle-like nature, and while I'm extremely high on his Eastern Palace encounter you'll see much later in the video, I sadly didn't enjoy the side-scrolling variant of this boss fight. He splits apart into small fragments, and the only way to damage him is to use your echoes to bring his smaller fragments back together. Sequentially, they'll fire electric balls at the player's location, which you can either avoid or tank, and if you can do enough damage, it'll split apart again into even more pieces. My struggles come from me failing to really grasp the verticality of this variant. It was harder to wrap my brain around stacking blocks and syncing up the timings I needed. I also completely forgot about the possibility of using bind to move multiple objects because I was just so focused on bridging gaps between the different platforms, and it led to a very drawn out fight that, while I super appreciate and I'm glad it exists, I'm just not very good at it. At number 12, we have Manhandler, found as the mid-boss of Farron Temple. Introduced immediately, this bulb snaps up the boss key and hightails it into the dungeon, and we also find it relatively quickly, taking on the first half of this fight mere moments after we enter the complex. It has green piranha plant heads that can be stunned with fire or by feeding them bombs, and once stunned you have to hack away at the weak spots to do damage. Do enough and the creature retreats to the depths of the temple where you'll need to find it again. In my first encounter, I wasn't aware of the bomb strategy, but it worked out in the boss's favor because I assumed the green heads were weak to fire, and when we had the second encounter, I assumed the blue heads were weak to the bombs because they couldn't be damaged by elemental attacks. Discovering two different weaknesses and abusing them to overcome this plant foe is exactly the kind of adaptability I enjoy in my Zelda games, and while it's simple and to the point, Manhandler continues to impress. I'm just glad to see another OG 1986 boss get a 2020s spotlight, as we hadn't seen it since Hyrule Warriors in 2013. At number 11, we have the Slime Eye, found as the mid-boss of Lanayru Temple. A returning boss from Link's Awakening, but with a complete visual redesign and an expanded set of mechanics. This is a fight of attrition and a vast difficulty spike if you are not careful. Your aim is to freeze the slime, attacking it while frozen so it shatters into two smaller slimes. You can see where this is going. You have to rinse and repeat the process all the way until the slimes are tiny, after which they shatter from enough damage while frozen. This is a fight where if you're attacking willy-nilly, you could end up with an army of small slimes on your ass who want you dead. And there's a danger to having too many enemies in the room, as should the smaller slimes land in the hot spring at the back of the arena, they'll then be able to fire jets of water straight at Zelda, which hurt a lot. Unironically, this mini-boss was the closest I came to dying in this entire game. No deaths, but had I died to the Slimezol, I might have screamed. The fight is a tad tedious, with the slimes taking a long time to shrink down to their smallest sizes, but it feels rewarding when you make it through, and feels like the only encounter where the difficulty matches the point of the game we're in. Sorry for the interruption, I am live to you from my new apartment. Ooh, we're still moving in, everything is very bare bones right now, but I've got my PC set up so I can keep working and making videos for you. And I have a message. If you're enjoying this Zelda content, first of all, I have an entire playlist of Zelda videos, ranking various games in the series if you're interested in that. But more importantly, my channel is trying to reach 30,000 subscribers by the end of the year. If you continue to watch this video and by the end you enjoy what you see, consider carrying that subscribe button right there. It helps me out, it makes this channel grow, and it just allows me to create more videos for all of you. Or you can go the extra mile and become a channel member. You get early access to future videos, a shout out in the description and at the end of every video as well, and hopefully once we're settled into the new apartment, I'll be able to do some extra special stuff for you channel members. So, back to the regularly scheduled Legend of Zelda programming. At number 10, we have Vocavor, the boss of Jabal Ruins. We actually first encounter him at the start of the dungeon, where he summons a large water spout to chase us down a watery side-scrolling section. And I won't lie, I assumed he was going to be the mini-boss. There's just something about his design that doesn't feel particularly threatening compared to the other bosses in the game. He looks like a little goofy prawn, and his weak spot being these anemone-like strands feels so non-threatening. His fight has a lot of depth though, thank goodness. He'll attempt to summon various whirlpools across the arena we have to swim over or under, which will leave him tired so we can go in and stun him with our attacks. He might swim to the other side of the room where a careful sword swing can get us some extra damage in, but the real challenge comes at half health when he drains some of the water from the room. Vocavor stays out in the dry air, meaning if we want to land on top of him to do damage, we either have to, well, land on him or platform up to him. Now in my initial boss fight I didn't struggle with this, using my chomp fins to harass him while I got ready to attack in sword fighter form, but I had a very dumb moment during the boss rematch at the Sleep Dojo where I kept sliding off of his body when I felt I should have been landing just fine. In hindsight, I needed to use a water block to get some extra horizontal distance, but it kinda left a meh taste in my mouth. The other bosses just feel more exciting, I really can't explain it. At number 9, we have the Volcanic Talus, found as a hidden boss inside Death Mountain. Now, I don't recall who in Goron City mentioned fire giants earlier in the game, but I know this boss had actual foreshadowing, which I really liked. It's ultimately a reskinned Seismic Talus who deals fire damage upon contact, so Ice Echoes are Zelda's best friend here. Now the challenge comes from the Talus not giving Zelda as much time to bind and remove the orb. The first few come off quickly, but his attacks are much faster, so it's riskier to get those hits in. Instead, as the fight progresses and the orb goes up his head and then to behind his back, you have to rely on your strongest echoes to get the job done. Lizalfos level 3, you were an absolute beast for your jump speed and aggression, allowing me to damage the weak spot from behind. This was another fight that had me worried about getting a game over, but I had more than enough healing smoothies to keep myself alive. For a reskin, they made the Talus much tougher, which I respect. I was just hoping for an original fight, similar to Smog and another overworld boss I'll discuss in a few entries. Like, imagine if they broke out Fyrus from Twilight Princess, but with lore of him being a fire giant as opposed to a corrupted Goron chief. I would have screamed! At number 8, we have Baronade, an optional boss fought in the abandoned ship. Now let me tell you, the absolute fucking scream I let out when I realized we were looking at a reimagined version of Ocarina of Time's Baronade was one of true excitement. Now according to the in-game files it's called a Bori, but come on. Baronade surrounds itself with a host of small berries via electric tendrils that allow them to shield the larger creature from harm. The goal here is to slowly whittle away the weaklings, avoiding large electric orbs shot out from the boss, and making sure to stay carefully positioned due to the water in the arena. Once all the berries are down, the boss becomes stunned and you're able to damage it, but you've got to be careful of getting too close, both due to contact damage, but also because of a large AoE the boss can use that launches a giant electric field around it. It'll then resummon its minions and you repeat until defeated. There's just something really fun about seeing a boss from Ocarina of Time reimagined as an actual living creature, as opposed to some virus nightmare. And all the fight was missing was a phase 2 where the Bori began spinning erratically. I found the Swordmaster arrows to be really useful here, as well as the Ball and Chain Trooper, who absolutely decimated the Biri's shield with each attack. He really worked it during my second cycle, and I salute him. At number 7, we have Mogriff, the boss of the Gerudo Sanctum. This mole-griffin hybrid is a force of nature with two very distinct phases to his fight. In the first half, he'll appear from underground and begin tossing sand waves at the player which you have to avoid. Then he'll dive underground and eventually launch out and upwards at the player, attempting to ram into them. The solution is to use one of the 4 animal statue echoes you obtained during the dungeon to intercept him, stunning the boss. Then do damage and repeat. Can I also just say, love this guy's design? The goggles to keep his eyes from getting dirt in them, the gigantic eyebrows which double as horns. It feels like he stumbled out of a Kirby game and into this one, and I'm kinda here for it. When Mogriff enrages, the arena shifts as 4 platforms rise up, while the rest turns into quicksand. Now, I'd literally, just before the boss fight, gone to buy the Gerudo sandals because I suspected I might need them, and lo and behold, I was right. Without them, you have to parkour to each platform, avoiding Mogriff's new tornado attacks as you go. Wait until he begins his charge, pop down a statue, profit. I'm just impressed at the level of mechanics in his fight in comparison to the first boss, the Seismic Talus. Nintendo really said, we think you're ready for something tougher, and I love that. At number 6, we have Volvagia, the boss of Eldin Temple. While his appearance in the game was spoiled by pre-release trailers, let it be known that getting Volvagia back in a modern Zelda game is exceptionally hype. While he wasn't my favourite fight in Ocarina of Time due to his high health pool and ability to really waste your time, I think he's more streamlined here. He still likes to fly around in the air between phases, but if you have flying echoes, you might be able to damage him while he's like this. Otherwise, you're waiting until he lands so you can pelt him with melee attacks from your strongest echoes, or arrows if he's over lava. Something I didn't realise until late into my fight was how Volvagia can also be stunned by the bind ability. Grab the green orb around his neck that he uses to fire his biggest attack, and pull on it to snap it back and stun him. Once you know this, the first half of the fight is a breeze, and the second phase is about picking the right timing between attacks to pull off the maneuver. His arena is one of the largest in the game, with a lot of ways to fall into the lava, most of which I discovered, and I like how each location he pops out of has its own little thing to deal with. Lava stopping melee damage, magma meaning Zelda can't walk near him without being fireproof. It felt like a real war of attrition between Volvagia and my echoes, and that made for a really fun experience. He takes the longest to kill of all the bosses still, which means he'll never escape the time-wasting allegations, but this is a great return nevertheless. At number 5, we have Smog Top-Down, fought in the Eastern Palace ruins. Once again, let me emphasize that I had no expectations for the tough monster quests initially. I thought I'd find like level 3 enemies for echoes there, not full-length boss fights and quest chains. So walking into the boss room after doing some spark puzzles to see Smog from Oracle of Ages made my jaw drop. Whether this means Oracle remakes are a dead dream or not, I won't say, but getting to take on the traditional version of Smog's boss fight in glorious HD, it was worth it. It was much easier for me to figure out how to connect the Smog pieces to each other with this perspective, which makes sense. It's the first of the 2 encounters in the game, the easier one would come first, but it made for a more relaxing experience for me. It felt like solving a crossword, getting to survey the room, dodge a few stray electric bolts, and use my vast stock of echoes to get the job done. It rewarded me for going out of my way to do the optional rifts to get those extra tri-shards needed to summon more boulders to move around. I just need to remember that I have the bind ability more often, though I also like not using bind in this fight because it adds an extra layer of challenge. And I think on a replay, I may also neglect to use Sword Fighter Zelda too. Let's let all the echoes do the work, shall we? At number 4, we have Scorchill, the boss of Lanayru Temple. I love the build-up of this fight, with this Yeti imposter having been seen during our ascent of the mountain with Conde, and the personal stakes that come with the fight are enough to have me invested. Now, in a series as long as Zelda, we've seen time and time again the gimmick of a boss that uses fire and ice, from Twin Rover, to Trinex, to Fraz, and that's not including other game series that also do the same thing. But Scorchill feels unique because this is a fight that revolves purely around your echoes and your ability to use them. He starts off in ice form, shielding himself in pure crystal, and the only way to break him out and make him vulnerable is to shatter the 3 crystals on his helmet. In ice mode, you use fire echoes, and in fire mode, you use ice echoes. His attacks are fairly easy to deal with in his ice form, general slams, and a tantrum attack that makes boulders fall from above, while his fire attacks are heated with fireballs launched at you over and over, and a fire AoE, which all hurt because the fire does slight damage over time. Then in the last phase, he can switch between both elements, forcing you to have to do the same. My experience in the dungeon fight was relatively straightforward, using Wizrobes to get all the hits in that I needed, but I struggled more on the rematch via the Sleep Dojo, as the Wizrobe's aim got steadily worse, so I swapped to Elemental Keys. It's not a hard fight, but the fact that it explicitly demands your use of echoes, and at least from what I could tell didn't use the bind ability, is a real plus for me. Bind is fun, but too simple in combat, so the fights that use echoes just interest me that much more. At number 3, we have Ganon, the boss of Hyrule Castle. When I reached the Imposter Council, I don't know what I was expecting, but a battle against the Demon King of Darkness Ganon was easily the last thing on my mind. And yet the reveal that he was but an echo of the original Ganon, paving the way for the true antagonist of the game, was absolute genius. One of my favourite little plot twists I've seen in a long time. The fight itself picks up right where we left off in the prologue, with Ganon using a lot of the same moveset, except now he's much faster. He can teleport into a thrust, which you need to avoid. He has his fire keys that he fires in bursts, all of them tracking you down, though if you're willing to face tank them, you can stand under Ganon and hit him while it's happening. He's got his Link to the Past Trident throw, where it launches across the arena and he teleports to a new location to catch it, one of my favourite moves to punish if you can predict where he'll end up. And of course he's got super fast energy tennis. It'll take 4 hits to stun him with this attack, and 5 hits when you reach the final phase. I don't know, I think it's absolutely insane that they just said, put the Link to the Past final boss here without any warning. And more than that, it makes sense within the actual lore that we have the moveset, because he's an echo of that original Ganon. Like, my mind was blown. Thank God we got to fight him at the end of the Slumber Dojo, or I would have been really sad. At number 2, we have Gohma, the boss of Farron Temple. And let me just say this, Gohma, Diva, after years of being one of the easiest bosses in your given games, I'm just so proud to say that I found you genuinely tricky and in Echoes of Wisdom. Not to the point where I would die or anything, but on hero mode, I'd probably need to watch out. The Queen of the Spiders has a lot of tricks up her sleeve this time around. She can shoot webs across the arena you need to burn, lest they slow your movement. She can summon baby Gohma that if you leave alone will hatch from their eggs, crowding their space. But if they hatch, you can kill them for sword energy, so it creates a push and pull. Now to beat her, you need to hit Gohma on 3 spots on her legs, with electricity attacks in a quick time frame to stun her. Whether she's on the wall or the ground, she then becomes vulnerable to attack. Once she's on ground level though, she has some melee attacks that she can break out. The easiest one, and the one I encountered during my main fight with her, is her dual claw slash, where she ends up vulnerable afterwards to electricity. You can just summon a buzz blorb next to her weak spots and boom, easy stun. But if she uses the fast-hitting multi-slam combo I experienced in the Sleep Dojo, you're gonna take damage whether you want to or not. And of course, she has a giant eye laser that she can shoot while she's on the wall, where if you don't have a Wizrobe getting ready to stun her, you're going to absolutely suffer trying to avoid it, because spiders need lasers, naturally. She just has so much to her kit that makes her a threat, and I think they balanced her just right, because I found her impressively tough despite doing Farron Temple as my last dungeon. But I imagine she'd be even tougher if you faced her before doing Death Mountain or Lanayru. I'm just proud she's come so far, and she only missed out on the top spot by a hair. At number 1, we have Null, the final boss and main antagonist of Echoes of Wisdom, and a Kirby-style Eldritch final boss if I have ever seen one. This creature existed alone within the void, and it vows to return the world to that beautiful state with the power of the Prime Energy. And side note, can we just start calling it the Triforce again? Is Nintendo allergic to calling it that anymore or something? This fight is long, with a host of different phases, attacks, and systems to overcome, so be prepared, fill up your smoothie pouch, and don't hesitate. Your echoes and bind mechanics are paramount here, is what I'd like to say, but I once again forgot to use bind. I wanted to fight solely with echoes when, as it turns out, I could have binded Null's arms multiple times throughout the fight to stretch them, allowing Link to cut them off. Look, nobody said I was smart, divas. Instead, I summoned all my best echoes, the Sword Moblin level 3, and the Lionel, who worked Null out. Then, after a lot of damage, Null tries to escape, and the boss fight takes a turn for the perfect. We chase after them in a side-scrolling sequence where Null begins to summon echoes of past bosses. In this bit, we deal with Vocavore and his whirlpools, which creates a nice level hazard to avoid as we try to chase down the boss with my level 3 Lizalfos. But it's the final phase when Null does his best Dark Souls pinwheel cosplay and the boss theme begins using Zelda's Lullaby as the leitmotif for the fight, which gave me goosebumps. Here, Null begins to summon the spirits of other bosses, the Seismic Talus for its room-clearing spin, Mogriff and his tornadoes, Goma's sticky webs, Scorchill's spin to win, and, of course, Ganon. But the best moments were when Null would combo these echoes together one after the other, creating these intense attack chains you had to adapt to avoid. Ganon Thrust into Seismic Spin into Ganon Thrust with Goma netting potentially on the ground, I mean, come on. I did feel bad that the only main boss I didn't see featured was Volvagia, but I get how he'd be tough to implement. All of this leading to a final bind as Zelda and Link pull out the Triforce of Power together, saving the land of Hyrule and banishing Null for good. This may be up there as one of my favourite final bosses in the series. The use of echoes was spectacular, and the use of the bind mechanic was smart, even if I never figured it out myself, and the amount of attacks on its moveset is just staggering. Null proves the Zelda series can still work with new antagonists, and I really can't wait to see what the Zelda teams come up with next. And that's my list. What Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom boss was your favourite? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of my future videos. My social medias are on screen now, feel free to follow me if you feel comfortable and recommend my Twitter or my Discord, but my YouTube community tab is a good place to go as well. A massive shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month, you guys are amazing, and I'll see you next time for another video. Adios!